Thank you so much for joining, Danielle, Duckie, Irwin. How are you?
I'm feeling good. How are you?
Amazing, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us all about the amazing things you're up to. I have some questions for you. And before we get into it, I wanted to read your bio for everyone who's maybe just now getting to know you.
Okay.
And so Danielle Duckie Irwin is the president of Makaha Learning Center, a Native nonprofit established 10 years ago in the Makaha Valley on Oahu, Hawaii, in the US. The Makaha Cultural Learning Center's primary mission is to create opportunities for Native Hawaiians and the people of the Waianae Coast through leadership, trades, training, and outreach programs. Makaha Learning Center works within the Hawaiian cultural framework and offers an Aloha Construction Foundations program and a solar PV installation training for certification with the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. Amazing. And congratulations, by the way, for recently being recognized as a top 40 under 40 leader in Hawaii. Amazing. It's been a true pleasure collaborating with you over the last year or so. So really excited for this conversation. And to kick things off, I was hoping you could give us a little bit more about your background, kind of expand on that bio, since I know that's so limited. And if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, as well as how you eventually came to form the Makaha Learning Center.
Sure. Well, I really like everything you said earlier. It's like everything in a nutshell. It's concise. Sometimes I have a hard time being concise, but I'll definitely give it a shot. But one thing is that I know that I've been on a blessed path. And when I look back, I realize that God really went before me in everything. It was really diverse and kind of random. So when I look at all of the pieces singularly, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. But now I do realize that I was being equipped for my role today. I went to school, university at Pacific University, and I double majored in journalism and literature. And I wanted to be one of those anchors on the 10 o'clock news. But then I ended up moving to Maui, where I became a lavender farmer of all things. I eventually did use my degree to get into public relations for Starwood, Hawaii. So at 23 years old, I was traveling up to cold country, in the dead of winter, dancing hula in a tea leaf skirt, telling people, hey, you need to come out to Hawaii where it's warm. And I would say that that was really kind of my big break that launched me on this trajectory. So from there, I started a graphic design company. I did marketing for Marriott. I started a wedding business on the Big Island, which is still in operation. And then when I moved back to Oahu, I joined forces with my husband and became the strategy officer for Hawaii Unified. And so it was my role at Hawaii Unified that really facilitated my ability to serve as the president of the Learning Center. So it wasn't a straight line, but I think that in the end, Makaha kept calling me back home, and I eventually settled into my role as the president of the Learning Center. I think you asked a little bit about the history of the Learning Center, and you had mentioned it earlier. It did start about a decade ago. And I am not the first president of the Learning Center. So it was actually started by an amazing husband and wife team that were anchors here on the West Side as well. They had owned a painting company, but unfortunately, they were not able to carry out the mission of the Learning Center. So the Learning Center was actually dormant for a long time. By the time I came into leadership, there was no recurrent funding, no programs, and no home for the Learning Center. So it really was a rebuilding process. And that's when I really took a look at what the mission was of the Learning Center. And it was a cultural mission. It was to perpetuate the Hawaiian culture, which is a beautiful mission. And I respect that. But there's a lot of organizations that do that really well. And when I looked at my strengths, I realized that there needed to be a shift. And, this actually not just based on my strengths and background, but also on the needs of the community, right? So I had a construction background and also the strength of Hawaii Unified backing me up. And so it just made sense to provide trade education and trade-based opportunities. So the Learning Center's mission, which is fully anchored in the values of Aloha, does primarily promote healing and advancement for the people of Hawaii, and that's through personal development, trade training, and community impact programs. That was
I
a
love
lot.
that.
Sorry.
Please, I could have this conversation all day, so please elaborate as much as you like. And one word you use, which is, we all know it living here in Hawaii, and I think our greater Pacific audience knows it quite well as well. But for anyone who doesn't have a full grasp on the meaning of aloha, some think of it as hello or goodbye or something like that. And I understand it can be deeply individual. So how would you define aloha, and how do you incorporate that into your work?
Yeah, so aloha really serves as the foundation for everything that we do. As I mentioned, we have a cultural background that's really the taproot of the Learning Center. And so we make sure that we undergird all of our programs with aloha. Aloha really does encompass what it means to live Hawaii. And I learned the practice of aloha through my dear friend and mentor, Pono Shim, who was the CEO of the Oahu Economic Development Board. He learned the practice of aloha through Auntie Pilahi Paki. And so as we go through our technical studies in construction, we also guide the students through a practice of aloha where they explore the values of akahai, lokahi, olu olu, ha'aha'a, and ahunui. And, it's difficult to be able to give a one-liner on what aloha is. But basically, aloha is to live Hawaii. Aloha is to love each other. Aloha is to love yourself. Aloha is to love the land. And that's something that I think is really important for people to understand, because it helps them to identify who they are and where they belong within this framework that we call Hawaii. And it really awakens a part of them that maybe had laid latent or dormant, and gives them that aha moment things suddenly start to make sense. So that's why we also focus on aloha as much as we focus on our trade training.
Beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges that your community was facing, and what the Makaha Learning Center looks to address, and how what sort of problems were present, and what does the center do to address those problems?
Yeah. Well, we had mentioned it previously, we primarily serve Native Hawaiians and the Waianae Coast community. I'm not sure if you've ever heard this fun fact before, and I like to tell it because it's just so appalling. But every year, USA Today, they put out a report that ranks the worst places to live in America. So a couple of years ago, Makaha was ranked the absolute worst place to live in Hawaii, and ranked number 4 on the worst places to live in the nation. And then our neighboring Ahupua'a, which is Waianae, came in at number 8, worst place to live in. And then our neighboring, farther down the coast, Maili and Nanakuli, they rounded out the worst 25 places to live in the nation. And, it's kind of like, how does a place that's so beautiful rank so poorly? And the factors that USA Today considered were high crime rates, widespread poverty, lack of entertainment, and weak job markets. And of course, everyone wants entertainment, right? But many of the issues that plague my community are symptomatic of poverty. So out of poverty comes the crime. People turn to crime because there's a lack of opportunity. There's a lack of opportunity because of a lack of education and, lack of business development. So, and even just to elaborate on that, every single one of the schools on our coast is a Title IX school. So that tells you a bit about the economics of our area. We do have a pretty decent graduation rate in like the mid 80s, but out of that, only 3% of our students are proficient in math, and about 15% are proficient in reading and writing. So kind of hard to be college bound with those kinds of statistics, you know. When you look at our other primary service group, which is Native Hawaiians, statistics on that are even more disheartening. So I actually have a list here that I just kind of wanted to read to you so people can get an idea of what Native Hawaiians are faced with today. But things like, and actually this is a study that was put together by the Native Hawaiian Organization Association, and that actually established the disadvantaged status of Native Hawaiians. But things like the highest unemployment rate, lowest per capita income, highest percentage of individuals below the poverty level, lower access to capital, so like credit or mortgages, highest homelessness, double the statewide average use of public assistance, highest rate of single parent households, highest rate of child abuse and children in foster care, and lowest life expectancy. And that is a tragedy. You know, obviously the Lahui is being left behind. We're also facing one of the worst homeless epidemics in the country. And where are a majority of the homeless population? They're right here, you know, in our backyard. So the logic in creating opportunities was to provide opportunities that create economic sustainability. You know, that really is the key. People need jobs. The construction industry needs workers, and really that mountain in the middle that needs to be navigated is workforce development and trade education. So the ones that are college bound are graduating and they're moving on. But for those whose pathway ends at high school, they get stuck in low wage jobs, they're unable to get ahead. And then sadly, if they can't make ends meet, they end up either houseless or they're forced to leave Hawaii to make ends meet. And it's tragic. So.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for educating our audience on some of the challenges and what Makaha Learning Center is doing to address this. I agree and see this with the work with Mana Pacific, is so much of it is about boosting the local economy and really looking at building, not moving from surviving to thriving, really.
Right.
That's what, you know, we all want. And we touched on this a little bit already. One thing that I like about the balance with your trainings is you come at it from a culturally aligned perspective. Why do you think it is important to align to the culture you're working with in order to provide these technical trade trainings and workforce development?
Yeah, that's, you know, that's something that's really important to consider. You know, when you're doing a presentation, you consider your audience. When you have a mission, you have to consider the people that you're serving. You know, there's a reason why the system is broken. There's a reason why Native Hawaiians are being left behind. And really, a lot of it is because a system came in and was imposed on them that was completely a 180 from what they were accustomed to. You know, so you need to deeply understand the people that you serve. And when you look back at the history of Native Hawaiians pre-contact, there was peace and prosperity. They were innovative. They were farming the oceans. You know, there was no lack for basic needs. And the way that they approached things was to first take care of each other. You know, a lot of people will look at things as in, after I take care of myself, then I'll look to take care of other people. But it was the opposite for them. Out of caring for each other flowed, you know, the benefits, the community benefits. And so I think that it's important to acknowledge the traditions, the culture, the ways, the winds, the way things operated of the people that you serve first, and then figure out how you make that fit into a framework of where we are today and what we need to accomplish going forward.
Absolutely. So we have actually had an opportunity to commingle our work a bit on the island of Molokai, which is
Yes.
really exciting and such a great example of a community that is taking power in their own hands. And so the community of Molokai has formed a community energy cooperative called Oahu, and they are building, owning, and operating utility scale solar and energy storage projects. And one need where Mono Pacific is helping them with some of the development efforts. And one need they identified immediately is they really wanted to have their own people doing as much of the project as possible, doing the installation, doing the operations and maintenance. And they recognized they needed some training and some capacity building and some support to do it. And so we had recommended you, and you were the Makaha Learning Center. You were accepted, and you have since been supporting them on the island. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about what you're doing with the Island of Molokai.
Yeah, thank you so much for recommending us. I mean, it's really just unfolded into this beautiful relationship. And there are so many parallels between our community here on the coast and the community over on Molokai. And you know, I think that one thing that's important to recognize is that we're dealing with a lot of the same issues throughout all of the islands. You know, it's not like Molokai trying to figure out what they're doing and Makaha trying to figure out what they're doing. We can learn from each other and collaborate. So for them, I know that the community is a very local community, lots of love, lots of aloha, but just like we were talking about who are we serving earlier, they're a little bit reluctant to bring in people that don't understand who they are, what makes them tick, you know? The Makaha Learning Center ended up being a good fit because we're very much aligned with that community out there, but we also have put in the work to get those formal credentials and accreditation that we need to be able to offer this technical training, and in a way where the students emerge with national certifications and credentials that they can take to employers to prove that they've put in the time and the work and that they're proficient in these things. I think that, you know, it's amazing that Molokai has become impassioned to take control of their energy future, and that they're willing to put in the work to see it come to fruition. And then beyond that, you know, because they're a part of that process, there's like that pride of ownership, if you will, you know, and buy-in that leads to excitement, and it continues that momentum. A lot of times we have, you know, we want to solve a problem, mainland company comes in, they do their thing, and then they poof, are gone, right? So I think that it is very forward thinking to include the community at every step of the way and include them in, you know, from design all the way through maintenance.
Absolutely. And how do you see workforce development? It's such an important piece of this process. And I really like what you're sharing about the information sharing and this model of train the trainer. I remember some of our earlier discussions with the Molokai community that they really love the idea of Makaha Learning Center helping them then teach the others in the community. And one vision that Mono Pacific would love to see happen is because a big part of our Moana Pledge is developing workforce development in the Pacific Islands, the 2021 Pacific Islands, is to then create even more job opportunities for the folks on Oahu with Makaha Learning Center, as well as on Molokai, to then go to Guam or go to American Samoa or go to Fiji and train the others so that they can continue to do the training in their community. This kind of scalable model is something I know we were discussing that I'm really excited about. So where do you see this as being what is happening on Oahu and happening on Molokai? How do you see it being able to fit as potentially a replicable model for other island nations and states?
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, there's so much work to be done that one entity or organization can't do it all. You know, and I think that what we've done is provided a model that can inspire people and that people can take and they can mold to make it fit their community. And so it's kind of like when you're running a mile, like at first, nobody thought you could do it in under I never thought I could do it in under 13 minutes, right? And there's people doing it in under 5 and under 4. And every time somebody does it, it's like inspiration for other people. And so what worked really well for us on Molokai is instead of us importing all of our instructors to do that, we provided the resource and the credentials. We actually trained someone from Molokai that was homegrown to be able to provide the instruction. So there's already that sense of trust and buy-in, and communication is facilitated because they're coming from the same place. And that worked really well for that community. And I think that that's a model that can work for other communities across the Pacific Islands. The goal of the Learning Center was never to get the knowledge and keep it, you know, close to the chest. It was always to share it and allow other people to learn from what we've been building. Did I miss anything?
No, that is that's amazing, and it's such a great example, and I can't wait for more to be revealed about this program that is being developed on the island. And this idea of going beyond surviving and now thriving, and really looking at true holistic resiliency. We're looking at the economy, we're looking at the health and well-being of the people, we're looking at the care of the land and the greater picture, this full true resilient picture that appropriately balances people, planet, and inclusive prosperity. If you are to explain what a thriving, resilient community looks like to you, if you were to imagine this beautiful vision that you hold for your community, what does that look like to you, and how do you see Makaha Learning Center helps build resilient communities?
I think that it's impossible to escape the economy and how it drives our communities today. But I think that there are ways to thrive within that and to work within that. I don't ever think that we're going to have a community where resources are distributed equally. And it was not like that even in pre-contact days. But I do believe that we can have a community where there is, you know, this free exchange of ideas and resource, and there's no lack, you know, where people's basic needs are met. And I think that when we take a look, we try to define problems. Like if you look at your health, you might look at, oh, I got high blood pressure, I'm on all these medications, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so much of that can be remedied just by changing your diet, you know, or adopting a different lifestyle. And I think that that's where this sort of indigenous wisdom comes in, because we already have the model, just like how the Learning Center model, we now are translating that to other communities. We just need to look back in time to see what worked and what resonated with our communities. And that's going to look a little bit different in Makaha versus Palau versus Molokai, or whatever it may be. And so I think that it looks a little bit different for each community, but I think a community that's thriving is where, you know, things are starting to unfold because we value the things that matter, which is each other, where we recognize that the people are the resource. And that's what we're fighting for. And that's what we're trying to develop versus trying to accumulate.
Very well said, Duckie. I so much appreciate your time. I wanted to give you the final word. If there's another message you would like to share or anything else you would like to share with our Pacific community.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's amazing, first of all, what you guys in Mana Pacific are doing for our island communities across the Pacific. And, if I were to say one parting thought to them is that really the future is now. And even though things are changing, it really doesn't devalue this indigenous knowledge that we have that was built over centuries. Polynesians were innovators and navigators, and they could even tell where they were or if they were on the right track just by putting their hand in the water and feeling the temperature or the current. We do have the power to shape what our communities are going to look like in 5 or 10 or 15 years. And we have everything that we need right here. And sometimes it's just about thinking critically and connecting the dots and learning from each other and supporting each other. So that's it.
Amazing. Well, this has been such an inspiring and uplifting conversation. I am so grateful for you. Thank you for all the work the Makaha Learning Center does, and really excited to work more with you in the future.
Thank you. Excited here as well. Same.
All right. Well, with that, I will say aloha.
Aloha. Ahui ho.